Welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast, episode 3. My name is Dan Hamilton. It is a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas. If you are new to the Voices of Veterans podcast, I'd like to welcome you to our community. We look forward to telling the stories like Ian Folau, who is a venture capitalist here in Austin, Texas, and also an Army veteran. As a Marine Corps veteran of OIF and OEF, I know there are tremendous stories of courage and perseverance after the armed forces, and in the coming months, if you follow us, we look forward to having many more veterans in this chair to tell their story. So let me ask you, Ian, tell me a little bit about where you are currently in your career post-service, and then kind of walk me back to your military career.
Sure. Hey, first off, thanks for having me, Dan.
Absolutely.
So I am the managing director of LMI Ventures. It's a venture capital firm that's strategically aligned with a federal government consulting firm called LMI. What we look at is early stage tech companies, investing in early stage tech companies, partnering with later stage tech companies, and really trying to provide the best solutions to our clients in the end, which are the federal government.
Sure.
Walking back from there, last year, I sold a company that I started. It was an enterprise software company. Started out in New York City, brought it out here to Texas, and with that acquisition kind of opened me up to a new opportunity with venture capital. Walking you further back, did business school before that, and before business school.
Where did you take classes in?
Cornell.
Okay.
So I went.
Was that somewhere you always wanted to go? Was that?
I would say I wanted to go somewhere that was going to teach me or have a large emphasis on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And Cornell Tech was the place for me. It was like an absolute exact fit of what I needed to start a company, and then kind of roll out from graduation and continue with that company.
Sure. Hit the ground running.
Yeah, it was, there was funding that came to us before graduation, so it makes the transition into being full-time entrepreneur a lot easier when you have money in the bank.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it definitely helped us kind of get the ball rolling. Going back before business school, I was teaching at West Point, so I ended my Army career. I spent 9 years in the Army, finished it out teaching German of all things at West Point, but I spent my career as a military intelligence officer in the Army.
What drove you to the path in the Army to pursue intelligence?
So I've always found it interesting. I'm an analytical mind. I think about patterns. I think about putting together puzzle pieces to figure out where we projected to go, what's our trajectory, but in that sense, I can also see from the opposite side, and intelligence is all about figuring out what the enemy is going to do before they do it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about a matter of putting those puzzle pieces together and saying, all right, I think they're headed this way. I think they have X amount of weapons or malicious intent, and we need to head them off here. This is how we can cut them off. That was always a fun thing to me. It's like a game of chess. You're playing with the enemy, and you're trying to guess what they're going to do before they do it. So it was exciting to me. It was fun to be able to kind of be at the tactical level. I served in Afghanistan, OEF. I served in a unit in Germany as well in North Carolina, but really kind of honing that craft of analytics and predictive analytics, I guess.
So before we got on camera, we actually had an interesting conversation about that kind of, I think, paired your maybe intellect to analyze things, but also a desire that your mom kind of instilled in you at a younger age. Can you tell us a little bit about how she raised you on that?
Yeah, so I grew up as an Army brat, meaning I traveled the world, right? So I was born in Germany. I went to high school in South Korea, and did a couple places in between there. But I was the son of an enlisted soldier. Did not have a lot of money growing up. Me and my two brothers, under my mom, were essentially taught how to make money on the side. Right, so as my dad was off working, my mom would come up with these business ideas, and she'd force us kids to be a part of this effort. So we did things like we danced the hula And
Yeah.
almost every other weekend, we would be at some kind of event, dancing in front of stages of thousands of people.
Wow.
And they would pay us to come do that. So that was fun. There was other things like crepes. We're not even French, but we were selling crepes in the mall. And I remember in Killeen, Texas, we had our own little stand, and we would put it in the mall, and we'd go there at early in the morning before the mall opened up, and we'd get all ready. My mom would print out coupons, and she said, all right, your task today is to be able to give out 100 coupons to crepes to bring them in here. And when you do that, I'll give you $5 to go to the store and buy some toys.
So can I pause you real quick? You still make crepes at the house today?
I do,
Is this something
man.
that's ongoing?
I love
all
crepes.
right.
Breakfast is my favorite.
You still got your mom's recipe, I'm guessing.
I've adapted.
Tweaked it a little bit?
I've adapted a little bit, but Nutella banana crepes is always going to be a favorite in my house.
That's surefire right there. That's good stuff, man. I like that.
But yeah, I mean, she taught us, the idea of getting someone to pay you money for something. Bringing value to somebody else, enough value that they're willing to exchange dollar bills with you.
Sure.
So with that, it's always been instilled in me. It's always been kind of the drive. I find a lot of passion in being able to build something that somebody's willing to give me money for.
So let me ask you a little bit about this. That's an interesting backdrop to what we've talked about this week, which here in Austin is South by Southwest. It's really become obviously a staple of Austin, but now a staple of Texas, and people are talking about it on a national stage. So when you think about your journey from the mountains of Afghanistan to being pursuing venture capital and investing in businesses here in South by Southwest, that's a drastic cultural shift. Yeah. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what that journey has been like for you?
So I think the common misnomer of a lot of veterans is I'm not a techie guy. Like I was in the infantry, or I was in field artillery, or I was doing something that's totally not techie. I'm not techie. I don't see myself working for Google. I don't see myself working for a tech company. And it's wrong, because every company is a tech company, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't really get away from being in tech these days. And what they don't realize a lot of times is even Google has salespeople, it has marketing people, it has people that are working the logistics of moving something from this place to this place. Yeah. There's a lot of areas underneath the phrase tech
companies, yeah,
that a lot of veterans don't understand. So when I got out of the Army, I went to, like I said, Cornell Tech, which is a school that brings together business people and computer science people, lawyers, like all these different disciplines. It says, group together, become a team, and figure out a problem to solve. And so for me, it was kind of jumping right in the deep end and saying, all right, I want to be in the tech scene, so let me jump in, let me figure this thing out. What I realized is I was much more techie than I thought I was.
Okay.
And I think a lot of veterans will start to realize that once they start to jump in with 2 feet into the pool and just say, oh my gosh, there's so many many opportunities here I just didn't realize because I was afraid of the word tech. So anyways, I jumped in, got started with trying to solve a big problem. I've done a lot of businesses, even while I was in the Army. Experimented with what does it take to market to somebody? What does it take for them to swipe their credit card?
So you were kind of cutting your teeth, you were honing your craft while you were on active duty?
Yeah.
And you were able to balance both of those
so
passions, if you will?
I think there's a lot more minutes in our day than we give ourselves credit for.
Do you find that to be true today, now that you're
out?
Absolutely.
So I have a wife and 5 kids, and I've started a business. I sold the business. I'm with Bunker Labs, which is a nonprofit. So I lead the Austin chapter here for Bunker Labs. So I do a lot with nonprofits. I do a lot with church. I do a lot with my family. I do a lot with business. And again, we just...
You find the minutes in the day just like you did when you were in the service.
I think there's more time than we give ourselves credit for. But kind of going back to the story of how I got here to South by Southwest and meeting with startups and being in the tech scene, embedded in the tech scene, it was really just kind of figuring out like how do I get the biggest do I blitz this thing? You know, how do I get the fastest accelerated learning possible for me to get going? I wasn't young when I left the military. Like I spent over 9 years in the military, so I was like the old father in my business school. You know, so I couldn't waste a lot of time, you know, just trying to figure things out. I just I'd go as fast as I could. First. So I would do things like go to hackathons. You know, you spend a weekend really trying to solve a problem, and you solve it in a techie way typically. So you get, you know, computer science guys, and you get designers, and you put them all in one room, and you say, for this weekend, let's try to solve a problem. And joining those hackathons and those competitions was just like a huge awakening to me of like, what can I can do a lot here in this scene. I can, you know, and I think from there, you know, we started a business. We raised a whole bunch of money for it. We went to investors and pitched it to them. They gave us money.
This is a software company?
This is a software company, yeah. So that this was while I was at business school. We started it up. I started with a bunch of, or a couple classmates of mine that were computer science students. And we got this thing off the ground. Investors believed in it, believed in us, and we just kind of got it rolling. And you know, from there, it's just like you're in the tech scene now, and your network just starts to roll and snowball. And now I find myself here with kind of a strong network because of that entrepreneurial jump. Got me into the startup scene, got me into the tech scene. And when I walk around here, it's really cool to be able to know other startups. Founders who are like, will come up and say, hey Ian, I want you to meet this company over here, you know, and really it's you know, you're just having that leap of faith and just being like, I can do tech, I can be in it, and now I'm in it, and now I don't know how I can get out of it. And
right. So if you weren't in VC, where do you think your path would have led you after, or was this the only path for you?
So VC wasn't like the path. It definitely wasn't what I intended on doing when I left business school. I knew I left the Army actually to start a business. I knew I wanted to start a business. And when that business sold, it was like, all right, I'm going to start another business. But then this opportunity came up, and it's really fun to be on the other side of the table for a little while, which is like I hand out the money instead of I'm begging for the money.
Asking for it?
Yeah. So it's fun to be on this side. It's fun to be able to look at people's dreams and say, I think you're on to a really good path. Here's some money. Let's keep going together, and let's push each other forward. But if I was not doing VC, I don't know. I love rugby. I'm a big rugby fan, so I probably would start a rugby academy.
There you go.
Yeah, and then have a bunch of kids come in, and we train them up to be rugby stars, go to college, do great things. You know, there's a professional rugby league here in Austin. We have a team and across the country now, so it's.
So that's your other passion outside of...
Yeah. I coach rugby on the weekends. 3 of my sons play. So, yeah, that's my passion. And I would love to find out a way to bring Samoa, which is where I'm from, and bring the rugby talent out there here to America and have some kind of exchange. But that's kind of like one of those dreams of like, someday I'll do this.
That's awesome. It's cool to hear that. We're actually going to come back to, I think at the end when we wrap up kind of what your future vision is. So we'll come back to that. Let me ask you about, is there a set of principles or is there a set of guidelines that kind of either drive you while you were in the military or dictate the decisions you make either on a day-to-day basis or how you evaluate companies?
Yeah. You know, first off, I kind of believe in the idea of give more than you take. I believe that when you give without the idea of getting something in return, but you continue to give, like things just happen, man. The world just like, it comes together, things kind of, your path starts to get, you know, it starts to make its way like
the snowball you were saying earlier.
And you just don't realize like what's happening, but things are just happening for some reason. But I do believe that the more you give, the more you receive. And so I do believe in that.
Was that something that you felt like you learned prior to service, or is that something that maybe you've learned since service, and is there something that's been added on to that or taken away that shifted since you left the military?
I think it was added to my mentality. I'm a churchgoer, obviously, but in the military, it was all about give. It was all about keeping people alive. Every time I didn't stay up a little bit longer to really figure this out, figure out what the enemy was going to do, like it allowed the enemy to get one step closer to us, right? And which meant, one step closer to our soldiers. So it was kind of instilled in me in the military for sure. But what I've realized is I'm not a great networker. So when I say a great network, I'm not the guy that will go in the middle of a crowd and start handing out business cards like, call me, contact me, whatever. I'm kind of like the guy that's on the periphery, and the guy that like talks to the one guy or maybe two guys by the end of the night, and that's about it. Right. But the way I network is I try to give value to that person. So if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I want to know obviously what they're doing, what they want to do, but I want to see how I can help. Who can I put you in contact with? Who can I connect you to? I think those are authentic connections, and that's the way I network. And I think through kind of networking like that over time, it's been a few years since I've been out of the military, people really trust me. I mean, people trust me from the sense that they know that I'm going to give, and I'm not just going to take from them. I'm not going to meet you, Dan, and say, hey, Dan, what can you do for me? Right? But I'm going to say, Dan, what are you looking at doing next? Because maybe I can connect you to somebody. Maybe I can help you in some way.
That is an excellent, such an excellent characteristic to live by, and I think it's something that when you're in the military, obviously you do it on a day-to-day basis, but I think when you talk to Texas veterans and they're coming back to their communities, that's something that you want them to hold on to. You want them to come back to their communities. You want them to continue to serve, because even you said it. I got out of when I got into Cornell, I was kind of old, right? You consider yourself older compared to the other students, but there's guys and gals coming back into the military, even if they're walking onto an undergraduate campus, who may see themselves old at 24 or 25 after 5 or 6 years of service, but they still have a tremendous amount of life that's in front of them. Yeah. And being able to find that sense of service, I think, immediately after you leave really kind of helped, at least it helped myself be able to smooth out some of the bumps after service. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some trials that you've had or tribulations that you've overcome, or it can be professional or just personal?
I think starting a business is tough. Starting a business is rough because you are doing, like, if you apply to a job, you're going to apply for a specific role, and in that role, it already tells you your description of what you're going to do in that role. And for the most part, you're kind of just focused on that role and excelling in that role. Nothing wrong with that, but I'll tell you, when you start a business, you have no role description. You have the company to keep alive, right? That is your role description. Keep this company alive, which means you're doing HR work, you're doing legal work, you're doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're doing you're sweeping them off in the floor. It's like you're doing everything.
You're the janitor all the way up to the CEO, right?
Yeah. So there's just so much to do in keeping a business alive and keeping it rolling, that it's sometimes struggling. There were times in my business where I just got to a point where I was just like staring at a wall. Like I can't, my brain is like shut down on me. I can't move anymore. Then there's portions in that, obviously there's these like ebbs and flows in business that, in a day you could go through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and then back to the highest of highs again. And it's just like so quick how things just move in the business world. It was all a struggle, man. Sure. But it was still fun,
Right.
The thing about business, like starting your own business, is you have no one to complain to. Right? Or you can't be resentful, you can't be bitter, right? And when you're in a job where you have an employer that you don't like, you can go home and you can complain about that guy and be like, oh, I can't stand that guy. He's, making me do this
Boss
stuff.
Boss is riding me again.
And I had to stay after for a couple hours after work when I'm supposed to be go here or whatever. But like when you're starting your own business, it was your decision. Like you wanted to do it, so it's like, I guess I can't be bitter. I can't be resentful that I'm up at 1 a.m. still working on this.
Since I'm the one that wanted to do this.
Because this is what I wanted to do. But so there's a little bit of like there's a little bit of energy that you receive from doing from the fact that it's your own thing, but it's tough. It's a tough life, and a tough life that you can't necessarily share with anybody.
Interesting. So now that you have been, you've learned the difficult lessons from building a business. Now you're on the other side of the table. In pairing those two kind of hats, if you will, has that changed the way that you evaluate companies or the way that you look at companies?
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff you're looking at when you're looking at a company, and one is obviously tech trends, right? So where are we going as a society? Where are we going as, and in my case, because I'm a corporate venture arm, where are my clients going? Okay. What strategies are they going towards, and where do I need to be to be able to satisfy their needs as they're headed that way? So there's a lot of these things around trends that you have to pay attention to, but it's more than that, right? So when I'm looking at a company, I'm looking at, all right, where do you fit in this trend, but where are you specifically differentiated from everybody else that's doing this?
How do you stand out?
How do you stand out? So maybe it's your team. Maybe your team has some really all-star people on it, and I know they can make it happen. Or maybe it's just some kind of tech that nobody else has kind of put the pieces together yet. Not that they won't do it eventually, because almost all tech is can be replicated. But do you have enough of a head start to get going and to be able to take market share, right? So these are all kind of things that you take into account.
Let me ask you this. So now that you kind of have worked through that process, let's say you find a business kind of in the sphere that you want, and you feel like it might have an opportunity to be a really good product. How do you evaluate the core product that a business has versus the culture that they have? And are you able to either balance one over the other? Is one weighted more than the other to you? And have you also seen maybe a great product where you go, the culture here makes me a little uncomfortable, maybe I should stay away from this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll answer this question in a couple different ways. So I do a lot of mentoring for startups. I try to help them, kind of find their path. And I come across some really great founders, and I come across some not so great founders. And when I say not so great, I mean they're not humble, right? So they want to come in and act like they have all the answers, that they're not going to take advice from anybody. I know this space, you don't know it, right? So and a lot of times we're just talking about business fundamentals, but
there's a sense of arrogance.
A lot of people in my space, in the investor space, as well as accelerators and incubators, which help push startups forward. A lot of them have this rule of we don't mess with a-holes, right? We don't like, if you are coming in without any humility, without a willingness to learn and improve through the mentorship of the people around you, because everybody has something to give,
Sure.
I take meetings all the time just because, even if there's no fit, because I know that they have probably something that's interesting to talk about, something interesting to be able to share, and we can share in ideas in some way. But if a founder is arrogant to the point where there's just a brick wall constantly, if you're talking to them, like, it's a non-starter, and like we won't talk to them. So the culture is typically set by your founders, but the culture of the company for sure needs to be taken into account. The product, man, I will say the top two things that I evaluate is it a problem that's worth solving, and is it a problem that's going to grow over time? So that makes it a problem worth solving. And then two, what does the team consist of? So the team, again, do you have the credentials to do it, to actually pull this off? But kind of speaking to your point of, are these good people? Are these good men and women that are like really passionate about solving this problem, but also willing to adapt to the environment around them? Willing to kind of take the advice of the people that are trying to help them. So yeah, those are kind of my top two, and then I get to product afterwards. The product is after that fact.
So the foundation to you when you come in is kind of the culture and how the
problem and team, and then everything else comes in, third, fourth, and fifth place to that.
I'm going to go in a little bit different direction now. Who is someone you look up to?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I say that because I'm not a fanboy type of guy.
Yeah.
And I don't like necessarily putting people up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Some people do it to me, and I feel bad being on the pedestal because I feel like, man, I can't do anything wrong, or else like I'm disappointing people, right? Yeah. So I don't like necessarily putting somebody up there. I do have mentors in my time, like my professional career, that have helped me along the way. So one in particular, Tim Walsh, CCMP Capital, private equity firm out of New York. Man, he's just been, I think, from not just a professional level, but also a personal level. Like, I know his family very well. I know what type of family man he is. I know what type of businessman he is, and just that kind of the advice of not just business, like how do I go forward, and what does my future look like as a business person, investor, whatnot, but also like how does this mingle with my family, and how do I ensure that my wife is taken care of, that my kids are taken care of. So he's been an amazing mentor to me. Other guys on the investment side, I've learned almost all I know in the VC world from David Tisch out in Box Group out in New York, Aaron Holiday, 645 Ventures, Thatcher Bell, with his venture group. I forget what his venture is off the top of my head. Yeah. But these guys are they've been helpful in helping me understand what's a good business versus a okay business, right? Sure. Venture capital is a totally weird world where we want exponential growth, right? We don't want necessarily like just slow growth year over year, which is good for some people. It doesn't mean it's a bad business. It just means it's not a business that's investable by venture capital, right? So understanding that difference was important, and those guys have been very helpful in helping me understand what does that mean for a company to be able to scale, and what are kind of the fundamentals, the indicators that help you understand whether or not it will scale or not.
Interesting. So let's kind of conclude on this. I appreciate you departing wisdom to us on how you go about balancing family life and professional life, and kind of the principles that you adhere to in your personal and professional life. Kind of getting to know you a little bit. I'm interested to know, and I'm sure our audience is as well, as where do you see yourself over the next 5 years? Where is an area you look forward to grow in? I'm a builder at heart, man. Almost every day I see a problem that needs to be solved. At one point, one of these problems is going to catch me and say, you have to solve it. You won't be able to go to sleep without solving this. Keeps you up at night?
Yeah. So, man, I'm building LMI Ventures right now. I'm building it to be able to bring in a lot of great revenue to LMI, as well as help our startups kind of get traction in the government space. That's what I'm building right now, and it excites me. But I don't know. I'll probably build at least 3 or 4 more things, businesses, by the time I'm ready to retire. So
fair enough.
So that's where my life brings me. Constantly building, constantly trying to solve problems in the world.
That's awesome. Well, tell us Twitter handle, social media, so we can follow you.
Yeah. At Ian Folau, IANFOLAU, for Twitter. You can also go to lmi.org/ventures, which is the homepage of our venture fund. If you're an early stage tech startup that wants to has something that could be utilized by the business of government, let me know.
Awesome. Ian, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for your service, and thanks for being a great example to veterans here in Texas. Thank you for watching and keeping up at home. We look forward to having episode 4 up shortly. On behalf of Chairman Bush and the Veterans Land Board, my name is Dan Hamilton, and thank you for watching.